Welcome, guests and travelers, to Magic the Friendly Tavern. Now, I am Will, also known as the Shroom Guy, also known as Ghost of Crows, and today I'm going to be telling you about Delver of Secrets. Now, what the big deal with Delver is he only costs 1 mana and can become a flying 3/2 as early as turn 2. If you play him turn 1, you can flip him turn 2. He can start swinging in. Now, you have to have reveal an instant or sorcery, which means you can't run a whole bunch of creatures with Delver, meaning that his evasive stats have got to kind of push him through on his own because he doesn't have a whole lot of backup. For a 75% chance to flip Delver, turn 1, you need 26 spells in your deck. Now, some decks run 23 spells and a few more creatures, or vice versa, it all depends. You also can't run a whole bunch of artifacts like equipment, even though the original Delver deck did have Blade of Trepidation. I do believe it was a 2 of. Now, that means you really just want instants and sorceries in your deck, so it kind of builds funny. The thing is it's a tempo deck. It only takes 6 hits with a Delver to kill you. That's 6 turns by 1 Delver itself. But, if you can get multiple out there, you can shorten that clock. If you don't know what a clock is the amount of time your opponent has before they die. And it's also the amount of time you have before you die. Your opponent can put you on a clock just like you can put them on a clock. And that's exactly what you're going to be doing, is putting them on a clock, and you're going to be kind of racing them. You're not really going to be blocking. You're just going to want to race them. You're going to try and get there before they do. So you're going to take a lot of punishment, but that's normal in a Delver deck. So now we're going to look at not this deck, but the one I want to show you today. See, told you I had a whole bunch of Delver decks built. And this is the one we're going to look at today. So let's take a look. Alright, so what are we looking at here? Well, while as I explain, I'm going to start rearranging these. And the reason we're going to rearrange these is so you can get a better look at them. While I do this rearranging, I'm going to pause the video. And we're back. So let's talk about Delver of Secrets when it comes to building a Jeskai deck. Well, first of all, we do have some creatures in here, but we also have Planeswalkers. Now, normally, you would not want to run a Planeswalker in a Delver deck unless you have to. And if you do, you want to run them sparingly. And you're going to have to remove your very hard-earned creatures for them for the slot so that you don't butt up against that 26 spell cap. Now, what we did was we cheated, and I'll show you how here in a second. First of all, I did shave down creatures. We only have 9 creatures with all these Planeswalkers in here. But we'll get to that in a little bit. We'll get to that in a little bit. Here's what I want to start with. We want to start looking at these cards individually. Now, we've already talked about Delver of Secrets. Let's talk about his good buddy, Spectral Adversary. Spectral Adversary is a 2-mana 2/1 with flash and flying that when it enters the battlefield, you can pay 2, a 1 and a blue, and any number of times you want. And every time you play it, it gets a +1/+1 counter. And it can phase out an artifact, creature, or an enchantment either on the field. It doesn't matter. Now, this is so good because it has flash. You can play at the end of the turn, and it's just ready to go the next turn. It's flying. It's evasive, just like the Delver. They work in tandem. And what I want to tell you is if you add 2 damage to the 3 that Delver is doing, you're going from 6 turns to kill your opponent to 4 turns. You drop 2 turns just by adding 2 damage to what Delver does every single turn. So this really complements it. Plus, it can get the +1/+1 counters and get larger. The actual phasing you can use offensively or defensively because of the flash. If they go to kill your Delver, you can flash this in and save it. If you need to get some blockers out of the way, you can make them phase out. This thing is really flexible. Good creature. You will see me run it with a lot of Delvers. Next, we're going to talk about Mila. Because we have Planeswalkers, we have Mila. What's so great about Mila? Well, when your opponent attacks one or more Planeswalkers you control, you get to put a loyalty counter on them. This means that they can take the brunt of the damage, or if there's only one creature swinging at one Planeswalker and you have two Planeswalkers out, the other Planeswalkers will reap the benefit. This is great. This is a really good ability. So far, I've seen it do some real work. Next is this next ability. Whenever a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability, you may draw a card. Now, with Delver, you have to be able to manipulate your library or at least draw cards so you can get to the cards you need for a very specific situation. You really, really want to be able to find your removal when you have to. You really want to be able to find your threats when you have to, because your creatures are going to get blown up. They're going to die. So, and with such a low creature count, it's hard to stay in the game if you have no threats. If you can't put any pressure on them, your tempo is lost and they're just gaining advantage against you that you're not going to be able to surmount because you have no late game. Now, this guy flips into Luca, Mila flips into Luca, this guy, and you may discard a card, and if you do, you draw a card. If the card you discarded was a creature card, you get to draw 2 cards instead. That's card advantage. Yes, you're +1 on that. That's great. That's what we're looking for. That digs pretty deep too. Next is we can return a creature from our graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, and we got to exile at the next upkeep. That's a free attack. So that's what we want. We're a tempo deck. We're looking for those 4 to 5 turns to kill our opponent. That's all we want. Is we don't have to come out turn 1 swinging like a regular, aggro deck like goblins. They got to come out turn 1 and stay strong till turn 4. We could actually wait till turn 4 and then just take 4 turns to win. That's the difference. That's the difference between a tempo and an aggro deck. Is you're just looking for a window. It doesn't matter if it's late game or early game. It depends on how you survived and how the deck is built. And that's why Delver has so many different configurations, is because of the way it's built slightly changes its window. Like it can be a mid to late game deck. It's just not going to go very, very late game. That's all you got to think about. So next, we wanted some equipment. And what better way to sneak some equipment into the deck than having it share a slot with creatures? This works so well. I actually wish I had more copies of this guy, but I'm a free-to-play player, and I don't. I just have what I have to work with, and I save up every couple of seasons and don't buy from a set so I can buy from the newest set coming out just to see what they got. And, I get the open packs along the way that I earn, and that's where the wild cards come from. And I sat on 30 wild cards before I started this, and I started building the Delver decks, and by Delver deck number 6 I ran out of wild cards. I have no more, but that's okay. We got this cool thing, and what it does is he gives creatures you control with equipment double strike. That's really, really good. It won't come up too often because we only have 2 pieces of equipment, and having both of them out at the same time is going to be kind of meh, but it could happen. It could happen, and we want it to. And say it happens like we have like 3 turns left to kill our opponent, then it comes out and you might like shrink our clock all the way down to 1 turn. It could. We just like that potential there. Plus he's a 4-mana 4/4, so playing him on this side is not bad if we just need some meat. Then at the beginning of each combat, you may shuffle auras and equipment. We have no auras, we do have equipment, so this isn't really that relative. But the sword part is great. The sword part is kind of what we want on a Delver because it gives it that magic +2. Remember we talked about that earlier. 5 mana means only 4 turns to kill your opponent. So you kind of want to put those 2 things together, and you can just slap this on a Delver. And then if they kill it, if it dies, you can return it to your hand. And that gives us protection for the Delver. So moving on. Next we have Icing Death. And Icing Death is a dragon from the D&D realm. It's connected to Drist, the Dark Elf. It's a flying vigilance 4/3 for 4. That's great. Stats are fine. Great dragon. Next, if it dies, we get a sword. And the sword gives that magic +2/+0. We don't care about our defense because we're not blocking. We don't need a hefty defense. We just need all the attack power we can get. And it also lets us tap down a creature when that creature attacks. That means that we get to get rid of a blocker. So this will nullify a blocker. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for that punch through power, that reach. This provides that. So great. Next, we're going to talk about Jace Miramage. For 3 mana, you get 4 loyalty. He can scry 2 or he can draw a card for 0, but he loses loyalty equal to that card's mana value. Keep that in mind. But he's really good because if you kick him for 2, you get 2 of these, and it's not legendary, so they stay on this field together. Now, what's really cool is that's 5 mana to scry 4, because you'll be able to scry 2, you know, like on both of them. So being able to scry 4 for 5 is actually not that bad a value. It's worth like a whole card. Next is being able to draw. We could double draw. You know, that would happen too. Draw 2 cards. You know, like 5 mana draw 2 cards isn't great, but having it on a body that you could tick up all the time, it's interesting. The other reason that it's in here is because I found out Jace Miramage combos kind of with Mila. Like if you have, say, a Nahiri and a Jace out and they're rushing down the Nahiri, this Jace is just going to grab all this free loyalty and just not die when you draw the cards, and that will keep him around for a while and keep the engine going. So he's kind of resilient. He's not as bad as he seems. You know, Scry 2 is pretty powerful, so you know it's not bad. So moving on. Okay, so this is the time that we get to talk about how I really cheated. You see, we only have 9 creatures, but we have a lot of ways to make creature tokens. This also effectively increases our army without losing our opportunity slots. Now, this first ability gives your creatures +1/+0, and they gain haste. You know, Zerial, 4 mana to start with, or 4 loyalty to start with. So you can pump your team. That gives us reach. That gives us, you know, that shortens the clock with the haste. You know, maybe we can get a threat out there and get it firing off sooner to start that tempo clock. Or we can, you know, start making little red 1/1 devils that deal 1 damage. Now, the thing about these things you got to realize is they'll trade with 2/2s, because, you know, they'll take 1 from combat and then they'll be able to deal 1 to the 2/2 and kill it. Or these can go to the face for reach. These little devil creatures are great. Then he also gives us 2 attack phases a turn with his emblem. Now, you know, ultimate. Now, you don't really worry about ultimating Planeswalker because it rarely happens, but, you know, it's not bad to be able to have that reach, that second combat step. Moving on, Nahiri. Now, here's what gave me the idea that I wanted some equipment, and that's when I ran across the other guys. But let's talk about this. She creates a 1/1 white creature, a warrior token that attaches the equipment to itself. That's great. So we can just slap the equipment on it and then have it go to town or defend us. They usually defend, but that's fine. This second ability, I'm actually gonna let y'all in on a secret. That second ability is kind of useless. We have no warriors, and we have 2 pieces of equipment that are actually creatures. So even if we did hit one with looking through the top 6, we wouldn't be able to put it in our hand because it's on the back side. Now, if we have an equipment out, she can deal 2 damage with her -3. It's not great. She's not optimized in our deck, but she gives enough value that we want to run her. Trust me, she's fine. Now, next is Mordecai. And the thing about Mordecai is he's also from D&D. The thing about Mordecai is draw 2 cards and then put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library. That digs pretty deep. Remember, it's not really about card advantage. We just really want to see card selection. We want to see a whole bunch of cards. But his second ability is another token producer. Now, this token is pretty good because his power and toughness are each equal to twice the number of cards in your hand. That can get ridiculous. I've seen this dog as big as a 12/12. If you got 4 cards in hand, which you don't always play out all your cards in Delver. Usually you hold back a lot. So this thing can be pretty meaty, like 8/8 normally. That that ultimate is all right. You know, you can put your hand in your library and then, you know, have no maximum hand size, so you're sitting there with all your spells. It's all right. If we ever get there, you know, it's fine. Now, we talked about creature tokens. These 3 spells next up make creature tokens. So let's look at them. First, we have Stormheim Unleashed, which for 4 mana gives us a 4/4 white angel warrior token with flying and vigilance. Wonderful. Like 2 keywords plus stats that match the stat line. That's what you're looking for in a creature. Now, we can foretell it. That means for 2 mana, we can play it face down. Our opponent can't see it. We can play it later at its speed. So next turn, we can play it. And its foretell cost is XX and white. Stop. Okay. Now, that means that you will you'll get more tokens. So you can pay 5 mana and get 2 tokens. That's 1 more than the spell actually costs, and you get an additional token that's 8 damage. That's 8 damage altogether. It's great. I love this spell. This spell works really, really well when it does what it's supposed to. Plus, having it actually cost white XX is easier on us because we're a 3-color deck and maybe not have access to double white all the time. So that makes this more flexible for us as well. Next, we're going to have a sweeper, apparently, that does not make tokens. That goes over here, and we are missing a spell out of here. Oh, this is great. Give me a second. I'm sorry, this thing does produce tokens. I'm being silly. Okay, so let's go through it. This is a sweeper. That's how I thought it should be in the other piles, because it's a sweeper. 5 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. Now, normally we wouldn't want to hit planeswalkers because we're planeswalker-centric. That's kind of the old idea. But, man, it's hard to pass up a sweeper that deals 5 damage to each creature. That's pretty good. For 5 mana, yeah, it's a little late in the game, and it is a little slow, and it's probably not going to take out everything. But it's worth it because of the second mode that's on it, which allows us to make 3 1/1 devils that deal 1 damage when they die to any target. They're basically 2/2, so think this is like 6 power for 5 mana. That's what makes it so good. Plus the flexibility of being able to do either or. That's why I'm running it. It's pretty good. This card is also flexible. I like my flexible cards. I'm gonna let you know I like my flexible cards. This will create a 3/2. For 5 mana, that's awful. We get to choose 2 though. We can also use the second ability and give it +1/+0 and indestructible and haste until end of turn. So for 5 mana, we can have a 4/3 that swings in immediately that cannot be killed. That's the kind of thing we're looking for in a spell. Something that opens us up to being able to do damage fast and efficiently. Pump Team is good. That's more reach. He can also deal 3 damage to any target, and we gain 3 life. That 3 life can save us, like give us an extra turn to finish our deed. And 3 damage can get rid of a blocker. It can get rid of an attacker. It can any target, so it can hit somebody in the face. Or we can sacrifice a permanent, probably a land, to draw 2 cards. Dig us through our graveyard. You know, I love drawing cards. This is what we're talking about with Delver. Delver wants to draw a card, so that's why it's in here. Next, we do have the removal suite, and we'll go ahead and talk about this one, even though it's out of order. This is Doomscar. Now, this is another sweeper. Destroy all creatures. Now, we can foretell it, and it only costs 3. You could actually foretell this turn 2 and cast it turn 3, but usually turn 4 is when you see it. That's fine. This gives us a lot of leeway in taking out opposing creatures. Great sweeper. Next, we're going to talk about Dissipate. Dissipate is a hard counter. It hits anything as long as it's still on the stack. Sometimes you do not want an enter the battlefield ability to trigger and you got to take care of it. Like, think about Book of Exalted Deeds. They have Faceless Haven in play, and they play Book of Exalted Deeds. Well, obviously you can't let the Exalted Deeds in play, or you'll have a bad time. So this is what this is for. This is preemptive. This is what we call proactive magic. Unfortunately, we only have one copy for now. Now, we also have Reduced to Memory in our deck, which exiles a target non-land permanent. Again, flexibility. This will hit anything from creatures, the enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers. Get rid of it. You know, they do get a 3/2. They do get a 3/2. The thing about it, though, is usually we can outclass a 3/2, and it's on the ground, so it doesn't stop our evasive flyers, so I'm not really that worried about it. We have a ton of ways to get rid of it. And I like the flexibility on this spell. Yes, sometimes it will matter, and sometimes it will mess you up, but that is a risk I'm willing to take to run it. If it does end up being bad, it will not make the cut. This would be like the first card you ever cut from the deck, though. Next, we are going to talk about our main kill spell, Rip Apart. 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. That's good. 2 mana, it's fast enough. That's what we're looking for in a spell. We can also destroy an artifact or an enchantment. There are a ton of enchantments running around right now, and 2 or 3 good artifacts running around that you have to deal with. Tegrid, when she's in lantern form, you got to get rid of that lantern. Jorn, when he's flipped over into the staff, being able to resurrect stuff from the graveyard, you got to get rid of that artifact. Cleric class got to be blown up, you know, before they hit the 3rd mark on it. This is just this is what you want to be doing. So then we have Tessa Talents. Now, Tessa Talents is in here for a very important reason. This will get rid of extra copies of a spell that hits, and it's only instant and sorcery, but it gets rid of them. They'll get to draw cards if it's from their hand, but we'll be okay. They're exiled. Now, this is for Alrund's Epiphany. They have to chain Alrund's Epiphany together to make a whole bunch of birds to kill you while they're taking their extra turns. If you counter Alrund's Epiphany with this, you can derail them completely. That's why I run it. Yes, it's a silver bullet. It's a one-of. It may never happen, but if it ever comes up, you can be glad you had it. And you can dig pretty well with the Dover deck. So I do have some ways to dig in here. So we might be able to hit it. Next, we're going to talk about our other main kill spell. That's going to be Faithful Absence with a nice picture of Thor in there. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Its controller investigates. Yes, they get a clue. Yes, they get to draw a card. Yes, you're never supposed to allow your opponent to draw a card because they can kill you with it. They have to take off 2 mana and take off a little bit of tempo to be able to cash this in. And being able to hit a creature or planeswalker, no restrictions at instant speed for 2 mana and white, let them have the card. If they bury you in card advantage, you were probably going to lose that game anyways. It wasn't because they top decked funny. Now, if they did top deck, hey, just let them have it. Anyways, moving on, we are going to talk about Fading Hope. Now, Fading Hope is definitely a tempo spell. You can get rid of a creature for 1 turn. Now, if we were on turn 5 and we need that 6th turn because we only had 1 Delver flip, during the game, this is the spell that's going to get us through. It's going to get us through that blocker. Also, this spell can be used defensively because, say, someone goes to blow up our Delver. Well, we can just bounce it back to hand and replay it and then let it flip because it only costs 1 mana. You will have that laying around most of the time. This is offensive and defensive, and most Delver decks run some type of bounce, and this one lets us scry, digging deeper in our library like we wanted. Really good synergy. So that's why we're running it. Next, we're going to talk about Prismari Command. Prismari Command is my least impressive command, I think, out of the whole bunch. But draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, lets us dig. That's great. Creating a treasure tokens means we pay 2 mana to draw 2 cards and dig, and at instant speed. Or we could do 2 damage and destroy a target artifact or any of the 2 that we want in there. There's enough value here to make it worth its while, so it's here. Next, we're going to talk about Multiple Choice. This spell is great. For 5 mana in blue, that's 6. 4 mana in blue, that's 5. You can do all these things. But if you don't, you can pay 2 mana to scry and draw. It's a little bit undercosted, but it's good. Now, for 3 mana, you get to bounce something of their choice to their hand, which is terrible, but sometimes in a pinch it'll be great. You can bounce your own creature too, like you need to bounce a Delver, even though this is a sorcery. We could bounce our own creature. Bouncing tokens is good. This second one is basically reads destroy target creature token. Next, we get to make a token. That's again why it's in here, because it makes a 4/4 for basically 4 mana. That we want token creatures, and this makes a token, plus it's got a whole lot of other upside. It does everything we want it to do. Again, I'm sorry if might have confused you, but yes, for 5 mana, you get to do all 3 of those things. That's good value. Next is Light Up the Night. Light Up the Night is a X burn damage spell at sorcery speed. These things are great. They have been since Fireball. Now, the trick with this one, though, is if you're hitting a creature or planeswalker, it deals 1 more damage, which basically negates the cost of that red mana. And the reason that's important is because if you're on the play and they're on the draw and their creature is basically matching the amount of mana they're putting out, so they're putting out a 4 mana 4/4, and you're on 3 lands with the spell in hand and it didn't deal that extra damage, you'd never be able to kill that creature. Never. You'd be behind with this spell all the time. So that kind of makes this more fair when you're fighting creatures or planeswalkers with it. It doesn't do it to the player, which makes it balances it a little. I'm kind of happy with that drawback. But it's also got flashback by removing loyalty counters from planeswalkers. We are a planeswalker deck, so this has synergy. This needs to be in the deck. It's great. It's exactly what we're looking for. Moving on, we are now going to be talking about the MDFCs. MDFCs are lands that can flip, are modal face cards, and you get to decide which side you use. Now, what these are doing for us is letting us run less lands anyways. And we get to run a bunch of lands. Usually Delver just runs a lot of little lands, and it would get mana screwed very often. But this allows us to run safe a number of lands and not get mana screwed and still have spells. Now, this first one right here is what we call a force spike. It makes them pay 1, or you get to counter the spell. Most of the time they'll have the 1 to pay, but when they don't, and this is a gotcha spell, man, you're gonna like it. They're not, but you are. The land does come into play tapped, but that's okay. The next one, the land also comes into play tapped, but you can put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library and draw that many cards plus 1. Say you flood it out and you have 4 lands in your hand, you just really needed some spells, you get rid of all of those and draw 5 cards. This is so worth it. 3 mana, it's good. At instant speed. Really, really good card. Next is Seagate Oracle, which kind of does the same thing. You draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand plus 1. Now, having cards in your hand when you're casting 7 mana, usually you have 1 or 2. So you could be drawing, 2 or 3 cards. But you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. It doesn't really matter. Usually we're not really worried about this front part, but when it comes up, it's good. It's good. It'll at least draw you 1 card. So 7 mana, draw 1 card late game, it might be what you need to win. But this one comes into play untapped if you take a lightning bolt to the face. Now, we don't care about our life total because, again, we're trying to just create a clock and race. So being able to drop a turn 1 Delver with this land in a hand that just basically doesn't have anything is fine. It's great. I run these in all of the Delver decks just because having a spell land is great. And then we have our basic lands, and that's about it. Again, I'm Will, aka the Shroom Guy, aka Ghost of Crows. I run Magic, the Friendly Tavern at Facebook.com. Come check us out. And if you like this video, let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys and have a good day.